What a great group of folks we have here today. Thanks for being here. I am the Milwaukee Press Club president. My name is Mary Ann Lazarski. I'm with Milwaukee PBS. Again, I'm happy to be here today with the president of the Milwaukee Metropolitan Association of Commerce, Gail Kooyenga. I want to tell you a little bit about him before we begin. He joined the MMAC in January in a newly created position as senior vice president. He served 12 years in the Wisconsin Legislature, including 8 years in the Assembly in the 14th District and 4 years in the State Senate in the 5th District before deciding in 2022 not to seek re-election. A Republican who represented Brookfield and other suburbs west of Milwaukee. He's also a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. Kooyenga is a certified public accountant who previously served as CFO for Stonehouse Water Technologies, LLC, in Milwaukee's Global Water Center, and held accounting positions at several other firms, including as senior manager CPA for KPMG. Before we get started, I want to thank our event sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is Spectrum News 1. Our supporting sponsor is We Energies. I'd also like to thank our event partner, WisPolitics.com. WisPolitics.com partners with the Press Club for this luncheon as part of its ongoing event series in Milwaukee, sponsored by UW Milwaukee, Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, 1125 at Pabst, the Medical College of Wisconsin, Commercial Association of Realtors, and Spectrum. I would also like to introduce our media panel for today. First journalist is Carl Ebert from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Next to him is Rich Kirchen, Milwaukee Business Journal, and Meredith Meyer from Biz Times, Milwaukee. Thank you for being here. Without further ado, please welcome Gail Kooyenga. The first thing that we like to present is this special Milwaukee Press Club hat. It's a collector's item, so they're going fast. And if you want one, they're up front, see Joette. And so you get one of these prized hats that you can wear around town. All right? All right.
I thought your gift was going to be like legs for the podium to make it taller. But, yeah. In the Capitol, they would do that. They had the desks are built for people not my height, so they had extensions on the bottom to make that taller. But hey, it's a pleasure to be here. I am in the midst of a lot of history in Milwaukee at this place, and so it's truly an honor to be up here. But I am a competitive guy by nature, so as impressive it is that the Milwaukee Press Club has been here since 1885, MMAC has you beat because we've been around since 1861. So, but to be in that very small category of organizations that have been around for that long is saying a lot. There's been a lot of history. And the one thing that is for certain in that history and in our future is that we are in a landscape that will be constantly shifting and making changes. And so I'm really honored to be in a position at the MMAC who has been at the forefront of observing those changes and making sure that we're making changes as a community to accommodate those changes and be a globally competitive region. So I remember moving to Milwaukee in 2001, actually September 2001, that historic month. And I started the job at KPMG. And I remember I said, hey, how long till I could move to a different city? And they're like, well, I want to move to a different city. I was like, well, I want to go somewhere cool, you know. And it took me about 72 hours to realize that this city is really cool. And that's for many different reasons. It's from my runs down the river, up the lakefront. It's from places like the Milwaukee Ale House and Water Street. But really what it is, it's a city that is full of people with very big shoulders that work hard and big hearts that care. And you see that with what we get done in our manufacturing sector, our building sector, and you see that with the level of philanthropy we have in our region. And when I really look at what makes me happy and what's driven my three careers, my legislative career, my military career, my business career, I really grab on to one of the people I really respect by the name of Arthur Brooks. And Arthur Brooks is a lead intellectual. He was the president of the American Enterprise Institute. He's been a great writer. He actually just came out a book with Oprah Winfrey. And he has done a deep dive into government studies on happiness and what makes people happy. And it probably does not shock you, because I see a lot of familiar faces here, and I've had deep conversations with many of you, that the thing that will not make you happy is having the nicest car parked outside, is not having the most beautiful spouse by Hollywood standards. The two things that make people happy is meaningful work and meaningful relationships. And so when I look at what drives me, and I look at the opportunity to be at MMAC, and I look at what MMAC does, it is having our leaders, is the locker room of Milwaukee of our business leaders saying, okay, that was the first half, now it's halftime, where do we go from here? At the core of those relationships is meaningful work and meaningful relationships. And so looking forward to continue that dialogue over the years in this position. I was told, Dale, you're not in politics anymore. This is not a 20-minute speech. This is a dialogue with the press club. So with that being said, let's have a conversation. Does that sound good? All right. You guys go from there? Yes. Yeah. Am I not using my command voice properly? There we go. Okay. Okay.
So let's start with a kind of broad question. Yeah. As you slide into your new position, what are your priorities for the first year?
Yeah, well, first, governance 101 is my priorities would be the board's priorities. And so when you look at the priorities of MMAC, our vision is to be a region that's globally competitive, support high-value jobs, sustain a vibrant quality of life for all. And that's really driven our legislative agenda. It's driven our programming. It's driven what we do with M7, economic development. And so right now our 4 strategy pillars at MMAC to accomplish that is growth, economic growth, demographic growth. And demographic growth is a big issue. We can talk about that. So growth, livability, we want to be a great place to live. That's why we fought hard to make sure that the Bucks and the Brewers were here. Growth, livability, talent is making sure that we have the international talent here to make sure that there is tens of thousands of kids that are talented but are not able to get through a school system and circumstances that are not allowing them to tap that talent. So make sure that talent, and that brings me to the last one, which is equity. And equity is a word that makes some people's heads explode in some places. I think some people are talking past each other on that issue. And it's very simply is, I'm a CPA, we are a business chamber. Equity is assets equals owners, liabilities plus owners' equity. It's ownership. And all we're saying with that is that we want to have a community where everyone has the opportunity to be owners, where everyone feels like owners, and we realize that we're all in together as a community. So those are priorities. Priorities will be to move forward in those priorities. Right now what we're doing is a strategic review. So I've interviewed over 300 business leaders in the area, 85 board members plus others. And the conversation was, what are our region's assets? What are our region's liabilities? And what can MMAC do better? And so what we're doing right now is between now and April 1 is we're having a strategic review committee, and we will discuss what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then we will come out and say, these are our priorities going forward. And I think some of that will look familiar. I mean, we're still going to advocate on school choice and education in general. We're still going to move and lean into economic development through M7. And I think there'll be some new ideas in there as well that will be announced in the months to come. Hi, good to see you again. It's not on. But let's see, does this have a long tail?
Okay, thank you. We're improvising. I love it. So I know that the Region of Choice initiative will probably be part of that strategic review that MMAC is embarking on. And I know, the program itself is it's come to its 5-year mark. And of course, this was something that MMAC rolled out in 2018 to help boost representation of Black and Brown employees at area companies. And so you may not know what the Region of Choice 2.0 may look like quite yet, but what do you envision for, carrying on the mission of the Region of Choice initiative?
Thank you for that. And so first thing that you said, and it has been universally accepted, is that the Region of Choice efforts have been a huge success. And we heard that from individuals, but also when I had these conversations with 300 CEOs, Tim had similar conversations. Tim Sheehy, the current president until January 2nd, he had similar conversations 5-6 years ago, and racial disparities rose to number 1 at that time. And now on the list, it was close to 4 or 5 as far as there. So there's been progress on that, but by no means have we reached a destination. And then also, I would tell you some of the things that concern me is the butterfly effect of how one George Floyd incident can completely erase gains that were previously realized on that issue. So it will definitely be a priority in Region of Choice 2.0. The leader on our team that has really taken that bull by the horns and has done great work is Corey Joe Biddle. And so Corey Joe Biddle right now is talking to the different stakeholders on that. They're coming up with ideas, and that will go to our strategic review committee as far as what that looks like. And I don't know if that will all be done by April 1 or if that will run through this year. As you know, the Region of Choice pledge runs through 2024 still, but we will come out. And I think there'll be some aspects that look similar to that as far as employers saying we want to have more diversity to represent the market. And have more opportunities, but there may be other aspects as well as far as supporting smaller minority-owned businesses, other opportunities, introductions, and go from there. So.
Dale, Region of Choice, of course, is a voluntary program. It's employers who want to make progress in terms of hiring and promoting racial minorities in their employee base. Obviously, DEI has become a hot button issue the last year or two, and it's an issue today before the UW Board of Regents as they're reconsidering this funding compromise with the state legislature. I'm just wondering, what your take is, or where you come down in terms of what the UW system is doing with DEI and just the whole controversy with the regents and the legislature.
Yeah. So, I went through our strategic pillars on that, what's important to us, and a lot of those issues that are part of DEI, the equity issue in particular we talked about, is important to us, support our members. And businesses aren't only doing this because they want to be good members of the community. They're also doing this because they look at the market, they look at the opportunities, and see that that's also good for business. I think that when you look at the University of Wisconsin and that system going back and forth, we're very happy that there's been compromise. I think it's not good for talent, and it's not good for the state to have these types of issues that are sitting out there. And we're also really happy to see that an engineering building is being done at University of Wisconsin. But there's other priorities to be done. I mean, we want to see University of Wisconsin Milwaukee. We need more healthcare workers, and they have a healthcare sciences building that needs to be approved as well. So, I think there's a room for a lot of improvement in the relationship between the legislature and the UW system, and definitely want to be part of seeing that improve relations. And happy there's a compromise, but I'm sure that these issues will come up again in the future.
Speaking of UWM, as a proud Milwaukee Panther, thank you. There's two of us.
Go Panthers.
Right. So every year the State Building Commission meets, and UWM has some proposals. Actually, they have to go through the regents first, and it does seem like a lot more buildings get constructed in Madison and other campuses than Milwaukee. I mean, what kind of lobbying is MMAC doing? What kind of arm twisting is going on in the background? I mean, and has UWM asked you to get involved?
Yeah, well, UWM has asked us to get involved, and we're happy to do that because we believe and we know that UWM is a huge asset to our community. They're just different institutions, and so we don't see it as, Madison versus Milwaukee. We see that our region needs both, and they have different types of programming. I'll just give you an example. With the engineering, is the UW, I've been told that UW-Madison engineering is an attraction more so for an academic engineer and international talent and folks from around the nation who want to go into engineering. UWM's engineering program is more likely to attract of that family-owned manufacturing business. So there's different markets that they're serving. But a particular interest to us with UW-Milwaukee is that Milwaukee is a first generation. There's few colleges in the nation that are as good as first generation college university accesses UWM, and that's really important to our region as well. So, I mean, our employers rely upon both institutions. We engage as our members want to engage, and we wanted to see the UW engineering building down, but we also want to see a lot of buildings down at UWM as well. And so, there's room for more improvements there, and we'll be working with them in the future on that.
There's been a lot of excitement with the Microsoft announcement. Is this working? Yeah. It is. Okay.
It's close your mouth.
Now it's closer. How's that? A lot of excitement about the Microsoft announcement. There's been other energy in that part of the I-94 corridor. Just wondering, from your perspective, what needs to happen to build on that and to keep that momentum going?
Yeah. Well, it is a huge investment. It's a huge win for our region. If you look at Microsoft as an international company, they could be, and they look around all over the world, and they chose this region for one of the largest investments in their company history. And it's also the largest investment that Wisconsin has ever had. And the number of incentives used in that project are zero incentives. So the scope of that project, I think, will come out more and more out over time. But the impact of that project is significant. And I think that there'll be other companies that come here that want to be part of that ecosystem. And it talks a lot about what our region has to offer, why they chose us. I mean, we have access to talent. So you talk about, the UW system, or the system of UW, whatever they call it now. You talk about our MSOEs and our Marquettes. That was one reason they came here. But also at the technical college level, we have some of the most efficient technical colleges in the world, with our MATCs and WCTCs, and Gateway in particular down there really caught their attention. Our access to water, our access to reliable energy. So when you're talking about that corridor, I remember when I moved to Wisconsin in 1999, going from Southside Chicago to Wisconsin, you would leave that Illinois border and it was some gas stations, A&W root beer, a couple of adult bookstores. I stopped at 2 of the 3. It was not the adult. And now we are almost to the point where when you are going from the Chicago all the way up to Milwaukee, you are very close to the point where everywhere you see there's some sort of development there, whether it be distribution centers, the U lines. I mean, so there'll be a point here, I think, in the next 5-6 years where you see no agricultural land. It's all developed. And that Microsoft investment is going to gain a lot of momentum. It is a company by culture that is slow on the press release and quick to get the work done and go. And so I think the magnitude of that is going to be huge, and it's going to have a lot of momentum. And what I see us at MMAC doing with our M7 is recognizing the ecosystem that's going to create, and then recruiting companies that want to be part of that ecosystem. And it's, as a father of 4, one of the things that really motivates me, and as I look at this job, is I would like to have at least one of my 4 kids live in the region someday, by mom and dad. And sometimes it's a sign of successful kids that they go other places to seek opportunities. But that's part of my motivation. I remember when we hired Ryan, our communications guy, that was the question that, he's the guy, we want him, is the same thing as a father, to just say, how do we create the opportunities here economically that really make our kids say, I want to live there and I have a meaningful career there. And the Microsoft deal is that type of deal that's going to create those type of jobs. I mean, the average wage there is going to be $90,000 a year. And so when you look at, the impact that's going to have over time, it's going to attract high quality talent people here and then keep people here as well.
Kind of going off of that, obviously economic development, there's part of that is, drawing large corporations and focusing on big projects like Microsoft, as you were just talking about. But the other side of that is really fostering an environment that is good for small businesses and entrepreneurs. So can you talk a little bit about how you plan to kind of balance those two efforts within, the larger effort of economic development?
Yeah, they're both a priority. I mean, the majority of the members of the MMAC are small businesses. So about 80% of our members are considered small businesses. And it's no doubt that a healthy ecosystem for economics includes small, medium, and large businesses. And so, we really have a lot of programming around that. We have a program where successful entrepreneurs coach newer entrepreneurs on what success looks like and best practices. More than any other chamber that I visited, and I visited many and studied others, is that we keep our dues amount really, really low in order to have a lot of members. So if you look at the Chicagoland Chamber, they have about 1,000 members. Dallas-Fort Worth, 800. We have over 2,000. And we have that because we want to have a broad chamber with different types of businesses. And I think that's also a more diverse chamber when you have that. The other aspect of that is our board is really encompassed by a lot of small business owners as well, and also individuals that understand entrepreneurship, like the Dana Guthrie's and Chris Abley. That means a lot to him, and Andy Newsmaker. So we very intentionally on our board have businesses that are representative, both from a diversity perspective and from a size of the business perspective, to make sure that is part of our programming and a priority going forward. Yeah. And I also say a lot of this too is recognizing what we do and what we don't do. So when we say that this is important to us, it's also important to recognize that there's a lot of other not-for-profits and other associations that are better to take the lead on some of the issues. So, I just read a book called Startup Community, and one of the points in that book is like, yes, we could support that, but a good ecosystem also has to create within the startup community. I think we have some good players in there that are also doing some good work in that space, and we're here to support those organizations as well.
Dale, you were involved somewhat, at least, in there was a delegation from Portland that visited Milwaukee a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
To learn more about good things going on here that they could learn from and maybe adopt. And so I've got two questions for you. The first one is, tell me about that. What was your understanding of what you were discussing, and what was your role, and what was your experience in talking with the group from Portland?
Yeah, so the Portland Chamber reached out. The president of the Portland Chamber has ties to Milwaukee. And so he reached out and said, hey, and we've also heard that Milwaukee has a lot of momentum. We would like to go out there and check out what's going on. So a team of us coordinated a visit with 80 professionals from Portland. They came here, and we met with them throughout that experience. But the feedback was refreshing. I mean, they were so excited about what's going on in our city. And the word I kept on hearing, must be like a West Coast word, because I don't hear that word much around here. They kept on saying, Milwaukee has significant swagger. We have swagger. And I'm so proud of this city, and it's so cool to recognize when other people come here and recognize the Milwaukee swagger. So a couple of key points from that. I mean, I think that there's definitely some public policy issues that they brought up that they would point to, saying Portland has gone the wrong direction with a dying downtown, and the very sad stories of them putting tarps over bodies on the street because their coroner can't get to the number of dead bodies on the street fast enough. And they pointed to things like legalized drugs. The other thing that they pointed out that is shocking in my interviews with 300 executives, 300 executives. And what's shocking is not only what was said, but what was not said. Nobody said that one of the liabilities for the Milwaukee region was homelessness. If you go around the nation and you talk to other executives in their downtowns, number 1, 2, or 3, homelessness. So a couple of key points in that before I move on from that point is that does not mean that we don't have a homeless problem. We have a homeless problem. Relatively speaking, we don't have a homeless problem like other places. And we really need to applaud. It's so typical in not-for-profit spaces. You don't get attention sometimes if it's not visible. We have to applaud both the government and the not-for-profit actors that make that a reality. So places like the Milwaukee Rescue Mission. I remember Chris Abley told me 10 years ago, I said, what are you going to do as county exec? Yeah, I'm going to solve homelessness. Okay, have at it. And sure enough, the strategies that Milwaukee County did with other partners have really set us apart on that. And so it's a whole conversation you could have with the folks in Milwaukee County, what that looks like and why it's working. But other cities around our nation, I spend every month I'm in Minneapolis, St. Paul for Army duty. And what happened to their downtown is absolutely shocking as a result of George Floyd and distrust, and then just like the momentum shifting the other way. Milwaukee's quite the other than that. The University of Toronto publishes cell phone data as far as what's going on downtowns. And if you look at the largest metros in the country, we're in the top 15% as far as the amount of foot traffic coming back downtown. Significant growth here. And I love the fact that our mayor has a big, hairy, audacious goal, which is going from 600,000 people to 1 million. Like, I love it. And so what can we do to, tell our story as a community and support those types of big ideas?
So for some reason, the Wall Street Journal didn't run a story about your visit until I think it was Thanksgiving weekend. And I'm sure you saw this story.
I did. Yep.
Hipster-friendly Portland tries the Milwaukee way. And the main point seems to be that we keep the streets and sidewalks clean. That was one thing that they learned. But the reporter said in years past, when Portland was one of the coolest, fastest growing cities, parodied in shows like Portlandia, such a visit would have been like Andy Warhol seeking style tips from Andy Griffith. So as Andy Griffith, what's your response? No, it speaks to that Milwaukee still maybe has an image problem, or like the word's not really getting out. I mean, how do you turn around that? I mean, it's one thing, when we have visitors here, we can show them, and like you had the group from Portland, but yeah. I mean, what's your message? How does Milwaukee just sort of deal with what is still that Laverne and Shirley thing?
Yeah. So I think you're calling like the tall CPA guy a little dorky there, but I'll get over this. No, I mean, there's definitely an image of Milwaukee that could be improved upon. Let's go back to my asset conversation. So one of the assets is that we have a humble, humility here, and we're not very quick to dance in the end zone. And we should, quite frankly, do a lot more dancing in the end zone. And so, because we have a story to tell. And I think, that would be part of a strategic review, is how do we tell this story more about what's going on in Milwaukee? I mean, that's why we're having the Republican National Committee here, not because we love politics. I don't think most people love politics, but people love telling the story of their region and their neighborhood and what's going on. And that's what the opportunity arises of, is saying, here's Milwaukee, here's what we do, here's why we're doing it. And there's so many different stories here. I mean, you talk about a lot of cities don't have a lake. They don't have a river. We have a river and we have a lake. We are known for manufacturing, but that's like it's part of the story. What's really going on is we're known for financial fintech with FIS and Fiserv. And you look at our healthcare providers here. We have disproportionately more insurance companies. And I mean, I go down the list of the food and beverage cluster that we have here in the area. So our economy is pretty resilient because of the strength of our economy. And I think telling more of that story, and where the future is headed is where Milwaukee is at. So I recently saw some analysis, and it said something to the effect that Milwaukee, or just in general, manufacturing was on the decline, because the number of manufacturing jobs in the region has significantly declined. Well, my question back to that was, well, what has happened to manufacturing output? Well, manufacturing output over that same time has significantly increased. So what do we call that? We call it efficiencies or productivity. And the only two ways to grow an economy is through productivity and people. So when you look at what's going on in our region, is we are really the intersection of what's going on with high-tech manufacturing coupled with robotics and automation. And that's happening here. We have leaders in this space like Rockwell, but we also have a bunch of other companies that you wouldn't recognize off the tip of my tongue that are in that space as far as finding efficiencies in manufacturing. So we actually represent more of the manufacturing sector of America than we have for generations, because we continue to produce and we're doing it with a lot of efficiencies. The other thing is that we have the second highest per capita employment in manufacturing. And that leads us to one of our goals one of our goals is to be among the top per capita income regions in the country. So if you look at that, we have a lot of success on that. That's one of our metrics. And so, I understand, I'm not going to discount that Milwaukee has a certain reputation that's maybe more, Laverne and Shirley and more old school. But the fact is, when you get people here and they understand the city, that's gone quickly. And one of the consistent themes I heard from the CEOs of companies like the GE Healthcares and companies that have to have an international presence, and they say, hey, we need you in Milwaukee. And the reaction is, oh, like Milwaukee? Like with my family? Yeah, Milwaukee, you probably want to take your family. And that's the conversation on the back end. On the front end. On the back end, it's, I'm not leaving Milwaukee. My wife, our kids, we're happy with our school. We're happy with the arts, and we're happy with the sports, and we're happy with the recreation in close proximity. And so it's really hard to get them to leave here. And so I think we just need to do a better job telling that story. And that's just going to happen with time. So overall, I was happy with the Wall Street Journal article. But I understand what you're saying, that there was still a little bit of, Milwaukee. But I think every single year we're moving past that. And I'm especially happy with, I think we have some great people like, our county exec's doing a great job marketing Milwaukee. Our mayor's doing a great job of marketing Milwaukee. And we also have a community full of business leaders who are doing a really good job marketing Milwaukee. And so we're going to keep leveraging that as well.
Dale, you mentioned the 2024 RNC that's coming up this summer. And it's expected to bring, $250 million in economic impact to the region, which is huge. Tell me a little bit about how MMAC is getting involved in, the discussions with the organizers, local or national, and how, you guys are really going to be advocating for some of those dollars to be spent with local businesses.
Yeah, so the MMAC was critical in pulling a team together with partners to make sure that that was housed here and brought to Milwaukee. And that was a broad coalition, a lot of partners. As far as a lot of the aspects you're speaking to, that's more the host committee. That's not internalized within MMAC. But obviously we will be doing everything we can to highlight the region and trying to maximize the economic impact of that. MMAC is doing more administrative stuff for the host committee as well. They don't have all the accounting system stuff like that. But generally speaking, we'll try to give small businesses opportunities to get to the door and have some events like that. But the biggest thing here, I think, is giving a positive face to Milwaukee and making sure it's a successful event. So one of the things that we're lobbying on right now is the federal grant for security has not changed since 2001. And so we're lobbying to increase that amount. We have great champions on that, like Congressman Brian Stile and Congressman Gwynn Moore and other bipartisan support in the Congress to make sure that security grant is increased, so that make sure that security is properly funded, which is one of our primary concerns.
This is kind of a follow-up on the image question. You'd mentioned the mayor's goal of getting the population to 1 million. He also said that jobs are an important part of that. What else needs to happen in order to keep population growing in the region? Yeah, it's a great question. A couple different aspects there is I saw in the Wall Street Journal that the relationship between population growth and rent or cost of living is 1%, 1%. So in other words, primarily in Europe, cities that are seeing an influx of immigrants is if you have a, let's say, 8% increase in the flow of people into your city, you could expect an 8% increase in rents. And so that's a problem from a purely populist sentiment and a political problem. If you're going to be successful in an influx of people in your community, you better have a housing situation that's already to accommodate that growth. And so one of the organizations that are part of MMAC that you probably never heard about is called the Milwaukee Development Corporation. And the Milwaukee Development Corporation is a real estate-focused subsidiary that is in the real estate space, and workforce housing is part of what they do. And so we partner with Habitat for Humanity. We were the ones that built the Library Hill apartments here in Wisconsin and are still in that space. In association with Near West Side Partners, we have bought an apartment building. We cleaned up the prostitution and drug issues there and then turned it over to more responsible investors. And so we need to do a lot to make sure that our housing is adequate. I think the other issue that's really, headwinds against population growth is the perception and reality. And there's two different issues here, perception and reality, because I think depending on who you talk to, there's things to unpack there. But the crime issue is we need to deal with the crime issue in Milwaukee. Because it's a problem. And if you look at statistically, the city of Milwaukee is one of the more dangerous cities across the U.S. Now, I think there's a dichotomy there where downtown, the vast majority of us feel safe. Like I said before, on the vagrant issue or the homelessness issue, we don't see that. We don't see a lot of random crime downtown. But the fact is, in general, throughout the Milwaukee area, there is a crime issue. And so that issue has to be addressed if we're going to see significant growth. But, I
I think that issue could be addressed. And for the first time we're seeing in decades, we have the city of Milwaukee adding police officers to the street, which maybe you're going to get there with a question, but I think that really talks to like what MMAC is MMAC is a nonpartisan, bipartisan, let's find the adults and put them in the room organization. And because of that, what we just realized was a very significant game-changing legislation that was passed in Madison. And there's a lot of different aspects to that, but let me just point out how that happened and why that needed to happen. Is the city of Milwaukee and county of Milwaukee, we're looking at significant cuts of services, a degradation to your park system, the closing of libraries, the drastic reduction in police and fire. And all that was because of mistakes that were made when nobody was in the room politically decades ago, and that was to have Milwaukee County and Milwaukee City have their own pension fund. And so we came up with a compromise that was with the county exec and the mayor and also leaders in the legislature. And those folks hammered out that issue for months on end, really over a course of years, and said, how do we both get to a yes? How do we both get to our priorities? And that was a significant win for our region. So now we have a local revenue source to pay for that. We have an increase in shared revenue. And because of that, you're seeing a fiscal solvency in the city and county, which I really believe will help solve those problems going forward and keep seeing that population growth we want to see.
So you've been essentially living and working in the business community for the last year after a number of years in politics. Any preference?
Well, I like the question because I'm going to dismantle the question a little bit as far as preconceptions. And this happened in the interview process. Is when I was interviewing with the board for the position, they looked at my resume and said, we thought of you as a legislator. We kind of forgot that you were so ingrained in the business community. So, when I look at what I did the last 12 years, I mean, really my time was split in thirds, and not on a daily basis or weekly basis, but over the course of a year, over the course of my career, about a third of my time was spent in the U.S. Army. I did a lot more time in the U.S. Army than a typical reservist, and there's a whole different conversation about what I did, why I did, what I did in the U.S. Army. The short story is the failure in Iraq and Afghanistan wasn't because of the ability to enforce and execute combat power. It was because we were unable to do transitional governance and win like we did 1945 through 1960 in the European theater in Japan. If we would have had those citizen soldiers with those skill sets in Iraq and Afghanistan, we may be looking at a transition there that's more associated with Europe's success today or Japan's success today than what we see in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I did a lot of work trying to fix that for the Army over the last 12 years. That was one of my jobs. The other part of my job was CFO consulting, working with startups. I did just as much time as that as I did in the legislature. In the legislature, obviously, you probably know me more from my work there. And so that's why I love this job and I love that question is because I am not a political person by nature. I am a policy person. I love policy. I love relationships. And so when I look at that background, I look at what I could do for the members of the MMAC. It's that business background and that political knowledge that I believe is going to help this region solve problems with the adults in the room. And so what do I like better? I know the legislative world or the business world. I like them both equally, and I found the perfect organization that accommodates that.
Are the adults in charge in the state legislature?
I think there's times on different issues. I mean, I think the thing about politics on any given day in any single body, there's times where there's adults and there's times where you're like, okay, can I get some adults? But, I think there's some really good people in the legislature across different parties that are really solving some problems. I think that the governor deserves kudos. I mean, on things like we just had a significant increase in the funding for choice in charter schools, a significant increase. I mean, that is something that most Democrat governors would not have done, but the governor worked across party lines and worked with the business community on that. And then the legislature also the legislature, for example, on the whole deal we talked about, I mean, they don't like to raise taxes. They don't like to raise taxes. And they agreed to allow a local option sales tax as a compromise because they said, okay, we understand the back and forth on that. And if you're just being a social media drama queen, you don't make deals like that. And so I think the answer is yes, is that there are adults in the room in those bodies, and we'll continue to work with them.
I was curious because you're currently a lieutenant colonel with the U.S. Army Reserves, and as I understand it, you have command of about 200 soldiers. There's not many executives who also, have that as, sort of what they're doing on the side, so to speak. So I think it's really interesting. Can you just share a little bit more about that experience and what your current responsibilities are, and how that also kind of translates into your business leadership?
Yeah, I love the question. Thank you very much. So you're right that there's not a lot of executives that are also serving in uniform. But I will tell you, especially when you get to the rank lieutenant colonel and above, most of those people are executives that have significant other obligations in the civilian world. We have General Ernie Latinsky here, who is at a RBIP chemical company. He's a general in the U.S. Army Reserve. Dirk Demink, who locally was in the business community as well. I mean, he was a 3-star admiral and also was running a large architectural firm. So when you look, it's not so much part of this Milwaukee community. We don't have a very strong military community, but nationwide is we have executives that are at very high levels of the military, and they are serving. And that is critically important right now, because the war that we're looking at with our adversaries is not a war that's going to be fought with tanks and artillery. It's a war that's going to be fought with investment and information operations war. It's a war that's being fought more with people who have civilian experience than people that know how to shoot off a howitzer round across a militarized zone. So I believe, and I think the search committee found this too, is that having that experience and having that insight as far as where the international world is going and where we're at, I think will really pay dividends for the MMAC in our community. I'll give you an example is, working with one of our board members, Bill Berrien, and also with WMC, we recognize that, we are the manufacturing excellence hub of the country. And yet when you look at defense spending, we're number 30 out of 50 on defense spending. There's the huge breakdown there of like, why are we so far down there if there's such a need for this? And so we just formed an actually statewide association, MMAC and WMC, that is going to start doing some programming and some networking and get to the bottom of how we could be more part of that defense industry. I mean, we have Oshkosh here, we have Marinette Marine, we have DRS Power Systems. I sense that we have tons of, not the primes, but the contractors that serve the primes are already doing that work. But there's a real opportunity here to get more organized on that front and seek more work and more opportunities for Wisconsin businesses. So we'll be doing that. But I think there's incredible synergies. I love doing both, and I just love leading, and I think leadership's leadership. And having serving country and serving the Milwaukee community. I think that the board, when they made a decision to hire me, found that as value as well. And we hope to continue that momentum. Last thought on that is also, I would like to see this community be quicker to embrace veterans return to the workforce. And so we're really going to do a lot of work with Mission Wisconsin. I already told Mission Wisconsin, hey, start sending me your resume so we can see who you have, and we'll find them a job. I apologize, not all those resumes get to our members, because one of them I stopped right there and hired her on the spot. And so Angel Ramirez joined our team because I saw her resume, Navy for 5 years, and then went to University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and saw that resume. I said, she needs to be the MMAC, so we stole her. But I really want to get I don't see why we cannot be a community that says every single member that's leaving the military is guaranteed a job in this Milwaukee community. And I'm going to do some research and some homework to see if that's a promise we can make, because my sense is that with all the opportunities we have in this region, that's something that shouldn't be a heavy lift for us to say, hey, if you honorably serve your country, we got work for you in the Milwaukee region.
I think this is our last question before we open it up, but kind of a personal one. Throughout this transition, there's been a lot of accolades for Tim Sheehy and what he's accomplished in 30 years. When you look at the path ahead for you, what do you hope people will say about Dale when he's ready to move on?
Yeah. Well, let me start with Tim, because I think the reason that Tim has been so successful is Tim never made it about Tim. And so, about your question as far as like what will people say about Dale Kooyenga in how many years I retire from this? is I think it's the wrong question. I think Tim's success and Tim's respect in the community is because Tim never asked himself that question. Tim never said, oh, what is Tim going to be known for 31 years from now? Now, I think if you're a leader and you're a good listener, you're naturally going to have that happen. And so that's where we'll end up, is I will end up making my mark on MMAC based on like what I hear from the community, primarily from our board and other members, and then by making that happen. And let me just give you what I think one of Tim's greatest legacies will be and is. And that was back, you look at 1990, and you had two people that took a tremendous risk. And the one was Howard Fuller, who was a frustrated former superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools. And you have Tim Sheehy, who was a very young new president of a major metro city association. And they said something has to fix, and they went to the board and made a proposal. And they said, let's embrace this new concept called school choice. At that point in time, school choice was nothing more than a chapter in a Milton Friedman book called Free to Choose. And it was those two guys who then corralled very heroic legislators across party lines who said, let's try something radically different. And you can see now in what impact that's had in Milwaukee, and then spread to Racine and statewide, and in the interim and continuously now, it's an idea that has gained traction throughout the whole country. The concept that parents should be able to send their children to schools that match their parents' principles and priorities. So the principles and priorities and their standards. And I think that's what Tim's legacy would be about many other things. I mean, I don't know if a chamber could have got the Brewers to stay here, or got the Bucks to stay here if it wasn't for Tim. M7 was a creation while he was there, and you see all the economic development have from that. So I think there's many things that Tim accomplished, and you should have him speak sometime, because he did say 31 years he was never asked to speak here, and he wasn't salty, but he's like, wow, I've been there for 31 years. They never asked me to speak, and the young buck gets to speak. But Tim's impact on this community has been huge, and I think if I do the right things and listen and just work hard, that hopefully I can make an impact like Tim did as well.
Thank you very much. We'd like to thank our media panel again. We want to leave time for your questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Joette will come around with the microphone.
Hi, Tim. I moved here to Milwaukee about the same time you did. And at that time, Milwaukee was a ghost town, or becoming a ghost town. No one came downtown. People were flooding away to the suburbs. But yet when I went to Madison to talk to legislators from outside of Milwaukee, they didn't really care if Milwaukee went to hell in a handbasket. They saw it as a financial drain and something that was hurting their community. I think that is changing. You can see from the pension issue and other things that people are starting to realize that without a healthy, strong Milwaukee, you don't have a healthy, strong Wisconsin. So what do you credit that change for, being? How did that change happen? And how do we continue? Because there's still a lot of pushback from legislators in the other parts of the state to invest in Milwaukee.
So I'm understanding I'm going to be confused with two people in perpetuity in Milwaukee for many reasons. One is Tim Sheehy, which is fine. He's a good guy, so that's okay. The other one I get all the time is Steve Novak. So that does happen very frequently. There was a pronounced change in tone. So what year was that you went to, and would you say that first conversation you mentioned? 97, okay. I'd say there was a little bit of that tone. There was that tone to a certain extent when I was elected in 2010 to legislature. Now, my Senate districts changed over time, but generally speaking, people never understood how much Milwaukee I represented. I had over 20,000 in the city of Milwaukee. Half the district was in the county of Milwaukee. And so I think there was a group of us, Alberta Darling included, Mike Kugelich, that had these districts that went into the city. And then when those conversations came up, and usually with more ignorance in a closed caucus setting than an open setting, we slapped it down right away and just said, you know what, this is one economic system. I do think like the Brewers and Bucks help pull them in. It's just different experiences. And I think that also as generations pass, there's less and less and more of a stick it to Milwaukee. ignorance about what we are. And so I really feel I have not, and I would challenge you, and maybe someone's going to send me something, but I have not heard an elected official from out of state say something negative about Milwaukee in a long, long, long time. I would say over a decade. So I do believe that there is a recognition there and appreciation that we're one state with different cultures and priorities and philosophies, but an economic system that's intertwined. And I do believe that we have that. And our two champions on the big fixes for Milwaukee was actually Tony Kurtz, who is from the area just south of Fort McCoy, Thomas Sparta, just south of there, north of Wisconsin Dells, south of there. So Tony Kurtz in that area, organic farmer, and then Mary Felskowski, who is from northeast, northern central Wisconsin, very rural. I mean, we have champions, and I think we've been successful in breaking down those walls, and I think that momentum has significantly gained speed with the new leadership in Milwaukee as well.
I like your word swagger. How would you the 25 to 35-year-old age bracket, how do you take it beyond swagger and specifically get them attracted outside the state?
Yeah. So increasingly so is that age demographic you pointed out. They're selecting regions then jobs, not jobs then regions. And so we really could do a good job, and we'll work with partners on this across the landscape here. But, I'm just telling you, as like a kid who grew up in Chicago, like what I do now just still blows my mind. And I will have days in the summer where I wake up, I go for, a run on the lakefront in downtown Milwaukee, shower up, have meetings in the morning, go to a Brewers game from 1 to 3, go home, have dinner with the family, and then we'll go out. We're a part of a boat club on Pewaukee Lake, and then we'll go out on Pewaukee Lake, or Okauchee Lake is the other option. So, I mean, just look at my day. And, I could have, and when I say like breakfast, I mean like some really good restaurants and really good lunches. And then, oh, by the way, the art scene. And so when you're talking to young talent and they're looking at where they want to live, I mean, New York City has nothing on us on that. Neither does Chicago or LA. I mean, San Francisco. I mean, we have all that, which I could literally do in one day. And I think like especially that 25 to 35, that's very attractive to them. And I also think there's a huge opportunity for working mothers throughout this country to look at what we have to offer. And I think it's a false choice that parents have to decide between their careers and their family. I think you could do both fairly successfully. But I think you could do it better in a city like Milwaukee, where you could whip around the city so quickly and have so many family experiences with your family in one day. Like I just put out like professional sports, good restaurants, and lake country. Yeah, so use your own. I mean, it's from a go out there and fight speech. I mean, use your own means. I mean, tell people how much you love Milwaukee. Get on social media, highlight that kind of stuff. Stop being so humble. You're not bragging.
Hi, thanks for this opportunity. First and foremost, I was just speaking with one of the colleagues here. And first of all, what is your height?
It's
I'm thinking 6'5", right?
It's 6'7".
6'7".
And it's 2 meters exactly when you're deployed. Because they will ask.
So I was talking to a gentleman earlier, Jeff, and we were speaking about the relation between home-based businesses and brick and mortar. And I was just wondering, you spoke earlier about Microsoft and how that could possibly change the dynamics of manufacturing jobs.
Yep.
When we see, for instance, home-based businesses on the rise, we're looking at a 75% increase versus the brick and mortar, which is sustainable from last year to this year. Do you see the projection changing with brick and mortar coming into the 2024? And if so, how does Microsoft fit into that equation?
So you're talking about retail specifically, or just general physical presence of economy versus digital?
Yes, in the economy, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the Microsoft investment highlights that there is no such thing as a completely landless digital economy. like that is all powered in one way or the other. And in that particularly, the amount of the amount of power that is required for your phones, the amount of infrastructure required for that is a huge investment that creates jobs and opportunities. And so we're going to be on the forefront of that going forward. So I think that we are doing a pretty good job as a region cracking the nut to make sure that we're tapping into this new economy. I mean, distribution is a huge part of that new economy. And if you look at the corridor that we talked about between Milwaukee and Chicago on 94, I mean, that's really taking advantage of that part of the economy. But I also think that, getting places like Kohl's to invest downtown Milwaukee, I really appreciate what guys like John Schlitzky and other CEOs are doing in our town, saying like, you need a physical presence. I think one of the things that COVID really showed us, especially in education, is that you cannot replicate physical presence. It doesn't work. You just can't. I mean, when Zoom says all their employees have to come back to the office, that should have us all scratch our heads. And I usually do this at events like this. I mean, can we have the same dynamic? Can we have the same type of conversation if this was done remotely? Like, we just can't. And so I think that's a big part of the Milwaukee community, that people still appreciate that and value that. And I think it's one of our assets that is going to be differentiate us. That we're a place where people like to congregate to be by each other, and that's going to attract talent and investment. Hey, little alibi. I said earlier the Microsoft investor average raise was 90. It's actually $76,000. 76. Before I make my comms guy nervous.
Any other questions?
Okay. Back to the reference to the younger working demographic, 25 to 35, and also your comment about employers wanting people back in the office, at least for part of the work week, and sometimes even big dynamic companies getting some pushback on that. Is it your sense that a lot of the businesses in the metro area are on top of that and doing things to attract those younger workers and the kind of lifestyle that they want to have? You mentioned they choose the region before they choose the job. Are they of the mindset to do what they need to do to attract that workforce and keep it? Or do you think that there's still some work that you at the chamber and other places still have to do?
Yeah. Well, yes and yes. I think that there's companies that are doing it very, very, very well, and there's companies asking, how do we do it better? And that's what MMAC does. So we actually have a group that forms, and those companies are sharing ideas. And you're saying, well, why would they share ideas? And they want to collaborate. They're hungry, and they realize it's not always the same talent that they're competing for. It's trying to get people to. I mean, talent comes in many forms. It's convincing people to not retire to Florida, but staying here in one way or the other and continue to be part of our economy. It's about getting more people through our K through 12 system. It's about having people moving here. It's about being a place that's welcome for immigration. Like, how do we be a place that welcomes immigrants so that if you look at our startup activity is below the average of a city like Chicago. And the reason for that is because Chicago has more immigration, right? And who's more likely to start businesses? It's immigrants versus the general population. So I think our companies are doing a very, very good job on it. But I think that a lot of companies can still learn from others. And it's an evolving thing. It's an evolving messaging. And I think most companies are doing pretty good on it in the region.
We have time for one more question, if there is one. No, in the corner.
Last one, best one.
Yeah. Hello.
Thank you so much for your service. Just going back to your thoughts on DEI, and I'm so proud that our chamber is really planting their feet and saying whether you're thinking about profits or you're thinking about morality, that DEI is where it's at. And thinking about a few weeks ago, we had a great real estate executive here saying to get to Mayor Chevy's goal of 1 million people, we're really going to be competing for firms and employment here in the city of Milwaukee. And so if the loudest person in the room sometimes is our state legislature saying DEI is maybe the biggest problem that we have here in Wisconsin, how do we, when I talk to national and international firms, I'm selfish, I'm trying to get commercial here, I'm trying to get my vacancy down for my commercial real estate. How do we get firms here when sometimes the loudest voice in the room or the pitch? I'm so happy you said the front side and the back side. Sometimes that front side, it seems that we're saying in Wisconsin that we don't like DEI. And then from the individual standpoint, instead of competing for firms, when you're a Marquette or you're a Baird or you're Northwestern Mutual, you're trying to get that C-suite or those executives from the people of Florida to come, those people that like the firms have choices between all these different places, how do, as business owners, do we push back and say, we're with our chamber and we really value DEI and we think that this is something that we need to integrate at all levels?
I think now more than ever, and this is the press club, so this is the place to talk about this stuff, is it used to be single sources of news and you could drive, and so you could drive what you want to influence a news source in order to get your message out. On issues like what you're talking about is we all have a microphone. And so I'm skeptical that we're going to be able to change everyone's messaging on that issue to say, hey, this should be what the messaging on this issue looks like. All we can do is message for ourselves. And for ourselves, for MMAC, our members, we made very clear that we need to have a diverse community where everyone's thriving, where everyone has opportunities, because economically, it's all hands on deck. Our workforce between now and 2040 is going to increase by 1%. So not only is this the right thing to do, and if you look at the disparities between certain communities, there's huge disparities. And there's no doubt when you look at things like redlining, you look at educational access, that there's significant issues to still overcome. And so what matters more sometimes than the messaging does matter, is simply putting your money where your mouth is and getting things done. And that's where we're going to continue to do the region of choice things we talked about. We're going to continue to advocacy with our school system and partner with them and just keep moving in the right direction. And hopefully over time, those conversations are resolved and, move past talking past each other. Because what I have found on these issues is when you jump out of the political realm and you have a conversation that's more intimate, you find out that people are politically talking past each other. And when you get out of that political one-line Twitter X type debate and just have a person-to-person conversation, you find out there's not this huge divide that you otherwise think would be there. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, before you all depart, just a few comments here that I need to make. First of all, thanks again for all of you for being here. Thanks to our event sponsors and the Newsroom Pub and Safe House for being the hosting sponsor of this event. If you're not a member of the Milwaukee Press Club, you should be. We have various levels, and if you need to know more about that, go to MilwaukeePressClub.org or see Joette, who's in charge, and she will answer your questions and take care of you. We have some great events coming up that you might want to put on your calendar. Thursday, January 25th is our City of Milwaukee's 178th birthday party at the Grain Exchange. Tuesday, January 23rd, UW Systems President Jay Rothman will be here. And Thursday, February 8th, Craig Gilbert, recently retired Washington Bureau Chief and National Political Reporter for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and now Lubar Fellow at the Marquette University Law School. So those are some great events coming up. Again, you could always check our website if you forget. But thank you again for being here. Have a good afternoon.